combat abilities are probably the one ability every character in Anima should invest at least a little bit of their development points in. If not for the ability to fight, then at least to avoid harm. The three core abilities for combat are attack, block, and dodge. They're all pretty self-explanatory, but I do think I should point out that block and dodge are two separate abilities, and while they're functionally the same, there's a lot more situational modifiers that negatively impact block, and it's also likely that your class prices block at a higher rate. Bear in mind though, there's still reasons why somebody might prefer block over dodge. For starters, shields grant bonuses to both block and dodge. However, the bonuses from shields are higher if you're blocking. Another consideration is that dexterity grants its bonus to both attack and block, whereas dodge is governed by agility. So it's somewhat situational, but block does have some cases where it's a better investment. It's important to have a high block or dodge in this game. If you get attacked and the opponent was successful, you lose your turn. However, if they're unsuccessful and you haven't attacked yet, you can counterattack immediately, sometimes with a bonus to your attack rating too. Meanwhile, a high attack rating comes with the benefit of gaining an extra attack per turn for every 100 points you have in it. When you put points into attack, you decide on a weapon that your character learned how to fight with. This can be any sort of weapon listed in the weapons section. If you want your character to be capable of using other weapons as well though, you need to spend development points on combat modules. Combat modules, quite simply, are special combat abilities that grant your character the ability to use other kinds of weapons without penalties. There are other modules that allow you other exceptions as well, such as one that lets you use your attack ability in place of magic projection, or that allow you to reduce the penalties you take for certain combat maneuvers. Following the weapon modules are martial arts. Spending development points on these improves your unarmed fighting, either by giving you different options for damage, granting bonuses to attack or defense, or by giving you some other perks, similar to the combat modules. They can even be mixed and matched, so you can take the bonus from Taekwondo of getting an extra attack, and you can use that with the bonus from Kempo to only have a -10 penalty on that attack, and you can also take the damage bonus from Tai Chi in case you have a lower strength than you do power. Each martial art does have some requirements you need to meet before you can use them though, and there's also a limit on how many you can learn. You can only learn one martial art for each 40 points you have in your combined attack and defense attributes. This means if you have an attack of 40 and a defense of 50, you can only learn 2 martial arts, because 90 divided by 40 is 2 with a remainder of 10. The final thing to note about martial arts is that learning one grants you martial knowledge, and this is important for learning different key abilities. Martial knowledge is what your character has to spend in order to gain key abilities, and there are 3 sources of martial knowledge for a character. It's gained as you level up, as you learn martial arts, or by taking the advantage martial mastery. Use of ki is the first ability you need to spend martial knowledge on. This is pretty much the prerequisite for anything you might want to do with ki. Most of the abilities offer passive bonuses, though some require the use of ki points. When you need to use ki points for an ability, you have 6 different pools to draw from, each correlating to one of 6 of your characteristics: strength, dexterity, agility, constitution, willpower, and power. Each one of those pools also has an accumulation rate associated with it. The base amount and accumulation rates for these are determined by your characteristics. A characteristic gives you 1 point of ki for each point you have, up to 10, though anything beyond 10 gives you 2 for each 1 point that you have. And then to figure out your base accumulation, just check the chart on page 94. This means that a power of 14 grants you 18 ki points for power, and an accumulation of 3. These can be improved by spending development points, with the cost for raising either being determined by your class. Your accumulation is how many points you can prepare for use in a single given turn, and if you perform action besides accumulating ki, this rate is cut in half and rounded up. If you need more points for a given power than you can accumulate in a given turn, you have to spend multiple turns doing so. Most of the ki abilities call for generic points, meaning you can use them from any stat, though some, such as characteristic augmentation, require ki points for the stat that you're wanting to improve. There is one ki ability that grants you another use for martial knowledge though: ki control. Once you have that, you can start spending martial knowledge on Dominion techniques. Dominion techniques are what make melee characters truly shine in Anima. You can spend martial knowledge to gain special attack maneuvers once you have ki control. These aren't exactly for the faint of heart, since this is one of the aspects of the game that have an incredible amount of moving parts. There's 6 steps to creating these techniques. First, you choose what level the technique is. This will determine the minimum and maximum amounts of martial knowledge you can spend on creating the technique, as well as how many disadvantages you're allowed to give to reduce its cost. There's also certain limits to effects based on the level of the technique as well. Additionally, you can't get level 2 techniques until you have at least 2 level 1 techniques, and you can't get level 3 techniques until you have at least 2 level 2 techniques. The second step is deciding on the primary effect for the technique, and the third step is also decide on any other secondary effects the ability has. At this point, let's take a look at one of the effects tables, so that I can properly explain all the things you need to consider. Here, we've got the attack ability effect, meaning this would make one of our attacks more accurate. Attack bonus is, obviously, how much more accurate we become. Primary is how much ki it'll cost to activate a technique with this primary effect. The same is also true of the secondary column. MK is how much martial knowledge this effect costs, and maintenance is how many ki points it would cost to keep the effect across several rounds. It's important to note that you need to decide upon creation if the technique can be maintained, since that increases the initial cost to activate the technique, and this cost has to be added for every effect in a technique. Level is the minimum level the technique needs to be in order to use that particular effect row. If there's nothing present, it can be used at all levels. Primary characteristic is the default variety of ki points you would use for this technique, with optional characteristic being how much the ki point cost increases for adding an additional kind of ki point that can be used. Related elements pertains to a specific disadvantage that restricts what effects you can use based on certain elements. So, with all that out of the way, step 4 is easy enough. You add together the martial knowledge cost of all the effects to arrive at the total cost in martial knowledge. In step 5, for each chosen effect, add together the ki cost from whether it's a primary or secondary effect, if you're giving it the ability to be maintained, and any optional characteristics you can pay the ki cost for. You calculate each of these costs separately, so if you're using 5 different effects, you'll have 5 different totals. Finally, at step 6, you split up the ki costs for each effect among the different characteristics you've chosen for that effect. After you're done with that, you add up all the different ki type costs, and you're done. Here's an example of the process for making a level 1 technique. I'm going to pick damage augmentation for my primary effect at 50 base damage. My secondary effect is going to be attack bonus of plus 50. The martial knowledge cost for my primary effect is 15. While my secondary effect also has a cost of 15, putting me at a cost of 30 martial knowledge. My ki cost for my damage effect is 4, and it has to be paid using strength ki. That's pretty low, so I'll leave that as it is. The ki cost for my attack bonus effect is 8 using dexterity, which is kind of a high cost for just one effect, so I'm also going to make it payable using agility as well for an additional 2, making the cost for this effect 10. My damage effect uses only one ki type, so we can overlook splitting the costs for that one. But my attack bonus costs 10 of either dexterity or agility, and I have to decide how to split it up, which I'm going to go with 5 of each. So the final cost of using this technique is 4 strength ki, 5 dexterity ki, and 5 agility ki. In order to use this technique, my character would need to spend a few turns accumulating ki until they have enough for the 3 different types that they need. Then I can use the technique, and I would be able to add 50 to both the base damage and attack rating of their next attack. And since it doesn't have a maintenance cost, if I wanted to use it again, my character would once again have to accumulate enough ki before they can do so. That was all the basics of different martial abilities in Anima, so I'm going to end this with some final things worth considering. First, wear armor is a very useful ability, since having a high armor rating in this game can make even solid hits against you do no damage. The amount of damage you deal with an attack of any kind is based on how well the target defended, as well as what kind of armor they have against the kind of damage your weapon deals. Generally, you need to have at least 40 higher on your attack roll than the opponent does than their defense roll to deal damage, and each rank of armor increases this amount by 10. This doesn't mean that a hit on an enemy is all for nothing if it doesn't do damage, since getting hit still causes you to lose your turn. Second, heavy weapons will lower your character's initiative. That high damage output may be impressive, but it means nothing if you get pummeled into oblivion by somebody with a faster but weaker weapon. Third, even if you're not playing as a martial character, it never hurts to invest some development points into dodge and attack. Wizards may eventually find themselves unable to use their magic, and psychic powers can be unreliable, if not flat out risky. So with that in mind, Tai Chi is actually a pretty handy thing to have if you're a wizard, since the damage from that is based on your character's power instead of their strength. Finally, most of the fighter archetypes can spend 360 of their development points on combat abilities. This means you can feasibly start off with an attack and defense ability of 90 at the start of the game. It's a tempting choice, but you'll quickly be cursing yourself when you suddenly need a ranged weapon, but can only use a greatsword. Going from greatsword to bow leaves you with only 30 attack, since there's a minus 60 penalty for using two wildly different weapons. Thanks for watching, and remember, if your GM says they're going to do things a different way in their game, what they say trumps what somebody on YouTube does. With all that said though, my name is Aaron Dereshadel, and I will see you all next time.